You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course, I will answer as many questions as I can. Or, even better, you can check out our webpage at letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. The archives are there. The new shows are there. You can send in questions, comments. You can even join the show. And, of course, there's the all-important donate button we ask you every week. And we appreciate when you click on that donate button and you help the show, you help our show grow, you help take care of our costs in the studio. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. And we are top 10 in FeedSpot's 10 Best Jewish Book Podcasts, and today we are still at number 5. So I've been gone for a couple weeks. Things have been happening, and last week we went on our family vacation. I know the world likes to go where it's warm. They like to go to Florida. I don't know why. We go up north. There is snow. So much snow. It was unbelievable. It was so unbelievable that when we tried to take a hike, I had snowshoes. Of course, my brilliant children decided they didn't need snowshoes, and as their legs sunk to their knees and further, they decided that this walk is not going well. They ran down a hill and said, oh, we can't go back up that hill. So they sort of went around the hill to the road, back up to the house, but it was really, really fantastic. The weather was gorgeous, which sounds strange for people who want to go to Florida where the weather is in the 80s, but it was in the high 30s. So you have your coat and your snow pants and your gloves and your boots and your hat. My wife was ready to sit under a tree. She did. And she said, I'm just waiting here for the animals to come. Now, they did not come, but she was going to wait, and she did. But it was really, really a great trip, and I missed everybody, but I am back. And we're at a Torah portion, which I actually think we usually don't get to talk about. Just how it worked out on the calendar, usually this week's Torah portion is the week that I'm up north. Somehow in the calendar, we were up for last week's Torah portion. So I have a feeling that there's a lot of good stuff we have not had a chance to talk about for a good many years. So this week's Torah portion is Beshalach. Last week's Torah portion was the final plagues, plague of the firstborn. Pharaoh comes, tells Moses, get out, and we leave Egypt. So now, the Jewish people have left Egypt, and interesting, at the beginning of this Torah portion is a lot of details that we really have to look into of leaving Egypt. The Torah starts out that God didn't take us on the path which would have led us right up into Israel. I mean, anybody looks at the map, right? Egypt is right next to Israel, right? You see that whole area where Gaza is, just right in. And instead, God took us the long way. And the verse actually says God took us through the desert, or didn't take us through the, I guess, up the coast, because it's too close. Like, whoa, it's like the opposite. I mean, we didn't go that way because it's too close. So, first of all, we really are heading, there's a few things we have to accomplish. Number one, we have to get rid of the Egyptians, and we're going to have to go into the Yam Suf, into the Red Sea, where they will drown. Right? We'll go, the sea will split, we'll walk in, the Egyptians will chase after us, we'll go out, and then the waters will just close in on the Egyptians. Why that wouldn't work on the Mediterranean, I'm not sure, but it seems that's where we had to go for this miracle to take place. So that's one reason, except the verse doesn't say that reason. A second possibility could be that we had to travel into the desert because our goal right now is to get to Mount Sinai to get the Torah. So it's actually closer to go straight through the desert than to go into Israel and then go to the desert. But that again, the Torah says the wrong reason. Just say this is the best path to get to Mount Sinai. Again, the Torah says nothing about that. And even if you want to say we'd go to Israel so we wouldn't get to Mount Sinai, it's also not such a good question, because nothing stops us from going to the land of Israel, unpacking our bags, and then going to Mount Sinai. It's almost like when we went up north to our trip. So usually we go tubing on Sunday. So my wife said this year she wanted to try it on Thursday because she wanted Sunday would be a totally relaxing day. Because if we're going tubing, you have the tickets. You have to have tickets, and if you don't have tickets, you can't go. Right? Since Corona, they've changed the rules, even though there is not so many people there. But when I have the tickets on Sunday, so you got to get out of the house because you got to get to tubing. But if we have no plans on Sunday, we can leave whenever we want. Then we actually left around 3 o'clock. The only question was, it happens to be that tubing is on the way to the house where we stay. The house is about a little under 4 hours away. And again, it's Michigan. Those in Michigan will know, but we're basically going straight north on what's called 75. And there's two choices where to make a left, but you can make one of the places we make a left off of 75 is right next to the tubing place, a place called Gaylord. And it's about a 3-hour drive from my house. So drive 3 hours, go tubing, and finish the trip. Or do the whole 4 hours and then backtrack an hour. So it seems psychologically, it seems a little strange. Like, why would you backtrack when it's on the way? But I told my wife, I said, and if the tubing place was an hour further, so we wouldn't go? No, this is home base. Let's go to home base. Let's unpack. If anybody's hungry, they can eat. When we're going to eat later, everything will be ready instead of going tubing, showing up at the house, and first having to unpack. In the end, we dropped everything off and then went tubing. And it worked out excellent. Really, really amazing. So to tell me the Jewish people can't go to Israel because they have to go to Mount Sinai, go to Israel, unpack your bags, and then go to Mount Sinai. Like, what's the big deal? You could do it. Like, who cares? So the answer is that God knew that we were going to want to turn around for multiple reasons. But one is it happens to be that half the tribe of Ephraim, about 300,000 people, had actually left 30 years earlier and had all been killed, and their bones were left to, I guess, dry out in the fields so that when the Jewish people would come, they'd see those bones and they'd be scared and they'd turn around and run. So that's what God didn't want to happen. In other words, it's true, God's leading us, and we had all these miracles, and these are the people that want to leave Egypt, and they want to go to the land of Israel, but we're fragile. And we just got out of Egypt. We're like we're not escaped slaves because we were freed, but the mentality is certainly one of being afraid. So if we just go up the coast, it's very easy to turn around. Because going up the coast on your left, so turn around, the coast will be on your right. But when you go into the desert, it doesn't take much to get out into the desert, and you have no idea where you are. That way, we would have to put our full reliance on God, and we can't just say we're out of here. And it happens to people in life. Things happen. You want to renege, you want to change your mind, but sometimes you're stuck. And sometimes being stuck is not such a bad thing, because it forces you to deal with a situation instead of turning around and running. So therefore, we couldn't go up the coast because that way is close. And that's what the language of the verse says. That way is close. It'd be too easy to turn around. You run into the first stumbling block. You're not willing to put in any effort to make it work. Therefore, we can't go the short way. And when we run into, and we will, run into multiple situations, you get the opportunity to learn to deal with a situation. This is part of life. Life is not always as smooth as you would like it to be. things get in the way, and you got to learn to deal with it. So the Jewish people has to learn to deal with it, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Unfortunately, half the time we deal with it by complaining, but again, that's all part of who we are and turning into a nation. It's not going to be so easy. Then the verse says, it's an interesting word that the verse uses. It says we went up chamushim. So either chamushim could mean 1/5, because the entire Jewish people did not leave. Many people did not want to leave. If you didn't want to leave, that was, I guess, okay, except you died during the plague of darkness. So not all the Jewish people left. If we left with 2 or 3 million people, that means we left 15 million behind. But if you say weapons, what do we need weapons for? Right? God just brought 10 plagues. Right? We don't have to do any fighting. God's leading the way. He's going to take care of us. Why weapons? So the simple explanation is because it is going to say later in the Torah that we did fight people that came to start up with us, and you're going to say, oh, where they have weapons from? The answer is we left Egypt with weapons. But really, we do not have the knowledge, the ability, or even the purpose of using weapons to fight. We're just going to rely on God to take care of us. And the truth is, you actually find this when King David eulogizes King Saul. He talks about how King Saul is the first one who had to learn to use weapons. All the stories of wars going on were all miraculous. We didn't fight. We could have held up staplers for the same price. The Jewish people were not fighting with weapons. God was taking care of us. We had to go through some of the motions till we get to King Saul, and we find out, because King David actually says that King Saul and his son Jonathan, Yonatan, had to teach the Jewish people how to actually use a weapon. We were not on the level to deserve that we could just march and God would take care of us. So that takes place hundreds of years, about 400 years after this story. So we don't need the weapons, but we do take the weapons. So the verse continues. Again, there's a lot of details, a lot of nitty-gritty stuff going on, but there's a lot to learn from just how the Torah describes we leave Egypt. So the verse points out that Moses was busy getting the bones of Joseph. What happened? We all know the story, I hope, that before Joseph dies, he makes all his brothers swear that they would make their children swear that when they leave Egypt, they're going to take his bones. Cannot leave Egypt without Joseph's bones. But when we're getting ready to leave, there was a different command Moses had given, that everybody has to get money. So everybody's borrowing gold and silver and clothing from the Egyptian neighbors. Who's taking care of Joseph's bones? So the verse actually says Moses is the one taking care of Joseph's bones. You know, the greatest people always make sure to run after mitzvos. And Moses is the one running after Joseph's bones. And it wasn't so simple, because the Egyptians had taken Joseph's metal, steel, whatever it was, coffin, and dumped it into the Nile River. Just rode it out to the middle of the river and dumped it. So first of all, who would remember from 160 years earlier where his bones, where his coffin was buried? There was one person that remembered. And even if you could tell me where his bones are, how exactly am I supposed to go get it? It might be a couple 100 feet deep in the Nile River, probably covered in silt, probably not to be seen. They don't have cranes. How are you going to get it out? Now, perhaps that's why the Egyptians dumped his body there. Perhaps they felt that would be a blessing for the river. Whatever it was doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, how are we supposed to get Joseph's bones out of there? So Moses has to take a plate, and he's going to write like a message on it that the ox should arise, and he throws it into the river, and up floats Joseph's bones. All right, I neglected to tell you. He went to Sarah Bas Asher. She's the one that sang to Jacob to tell Jacob that Joseph was alive. She pointed out, she knew where the location was. So Moses is the one that is going to take care of Joseph's bones. And actually, it was very necessary. First of all, we can't leave it out because we promised. That's first and foremost. But secondly, when we get to the Red Sea and Moses is telling the sea to split. So the sea is arguing with God. I should split. The Egyptians do idol worship. The Jewish people at that point did idol worship. Why do they deserve I should split? And then it says, Vayar Hayam Vayanos. The river saw and it fled, meaning it split. What did it see? It saw the bones of Joseph. And the bones of Joseph, he was the one that was able to withstand the test to not sleep with Potiphar's wife. And that merit caused the Red Sea to split. So it's like the key, right? We didn't know that we needed that key. We just knew that there was a promise. But without those bones, there was a problem getting the sea to split. So Moses is busy taking care of Joseph's bones. First of all, to fulfill the promise. And second, Moses wants to run after mitzvahs. Some people collect money. Moses, great people, are always running around trying to collect mitzvahs. Then the verse tells us that we had and how do you know where to go? What led the way? So interesting enough, God has this pillar of cloud by day that his presence is in, and we follow that pillar of cloud. And at night, a pillar of fire comes down so we can see where we're going. And it must have been pretty bright because it lit up everything. And the cloud disappears. And this was every day now for the next 40 years. The pillar of cloud is by day, pillar of fire is by night, and that, if it's not going anywhere, we don't go anywhere. But when the cloud moves, then we do follow the cloud. Okay. So the Jewish people are traveling out towards the desert. And in the meanwhile, we get into the desert, and God tells Moses, okay, we're going to turn around now. I know you're in the desert, but we're going to turn around and go back to the Red Sea, because that's where I'm going to destroy Pharaoh. Now, the Torah makes a big deal that we listened to Moses and we turned around. We didn't argue with him. So I used to always wonder, what would it help? You're going to argue with Moses and go where? In the desert? You're going to escape from the Egyptian army? So it'll just travel into the desert a few more hours. What's it going to help you running to the desert? So I saw, if we would have gotten deep into the desert, so the surrounding nations, who anyways didn't like Egypt, because Egypt was a world power, so those surrounding nations like Midian, Moab, other nations that lived out in the desert, they would say, hey, there's 2 million Jews. We'll join up with them, and then we'll have an army that can fight Pharaoh. So if we would have kept going in the desert, they would have joined up with us. The problem was we turned around. You turn around, we're not going into Egyptian territory to fight with you. We'll fight if you get to our territory. We turn around. And now you got to wonder what happens next. So either there were messengers that went with Pharaoh, or perhaps there were some Jewish troublemakers that went back to Pharaoh. Because if you remember way back in the original conversation, Moses originally had offered Pharaoh, we're going into the desert for 3 days, bring sacrifices, we're coming back. We're not coming back. Now, by the way, we've already been freed, so there's no reason to come back. But either the people that went along or the Jews that went back tell Pharaoh, say, hey, Pharaoh, they're not coming back.